known to him the interpretation. O thou king, the Most High God gave Nebuchadnezzar thy father a kingdom, and majesty, and glory, and honor. And for the majesty that he gave him, all people, nations, and languages tremble and fear before him. Whom he would he slew, and whom he kept alive, and whom he would he set up, and whom he would he put down. But when his heart was lifted up, and his mind hardened in pride, he was deposed from his kingly throne, and they took his glory from him. And he was driven from the sons of men, and his heart was made like the beast, and his dwelling was with the wild asses. They fed him with grass like oxen, and his body was with the dew of heaven, till he knew that the Most High God ruled in the kingdom of men, and that he appointed over it whomsoever he will.
And thou his son, O Belshazzar, hast not humbled thine heart, though thou knewest all this, but hast lifted up thyself against the Lord of heaven. And they have brought the vessels of his house before thee, and thou and thy lords, thy wives, and thy concubines have drunk wine in them. And thou hast praised the gods of silver and gold, of brass, iron, wood, and stone, which see not, nor hear, nor know, and the God in whose hands thy breath is, and whose are all thy ways, hast thou not glorified. Then was the part of the hand sent from him, and this writing was written. And this is the writing that was written. Meaning, tickle, you parson. This is the interpretation of the thing, meaning, God hath numbered thy kingdom and finished it. Tickle, thou art weighed in the balances and art found wanting. Peres, thy kingdom is divided and given to the Medes and the Persians. Then commanded Belteshazzar, and they clothed Daniel with scarlet, and put a chain of gold about his neck, and made a proclamation concerning him, that he should be the third ruler in the kingdom. In that night was Belteshazzar, the king of the Chaldeans, slain, and Darius the Median took the kingdom, being about 62 years old.
62 years old. Well, I guess that version could be worse, Dave.
It has some problems.
Okay, Daniel chapter 5. Remember, what was the last thing we studied in Daniel 4? Does anyone recall? There was another dream, right? Which was a prophecy about someone. It concerns
The tree, that one?
Right. What was that all about? It was about Satan, right? But in the historical account, it concerned Nebuchadnezzar, right? So for the first 4 chapters of Daniel, we continued dealing with King Nebuchadnezzar. Now we're kind of fast forwarding some years down through time, and we're getting to the reign of who? Belshazzar. And Dave, did your verse 1 say Belteshazzar or Belshazzar? Because Belteshazzar was the Babylonian name of Daniel, right? What does it say in Daniel 5:1? Hi, Pam.
Hi, Pam.
How you doing?
4. What's going on here?
Daniel 5:1. I think that's 4. Yeah.
Between 1389. There's a page. Look at that.
It's a tricky Bible.
It is.
There it is. There you go.
That's a hard thing to deal with.
So what does it say in verse 1?
Belshazzar.
Okay, so just say Belshazzar. Yeah, because I thought you said Belteshazzar.
Belshazzar.
Yeah, that would be a change, right?
Yeah, I'm used to that Belshazzar name.
Pam, we're in Daniel chapter 5.
Belta is the other one.
Belshazzar. Yeah, that's Daniel. Okay, so Daniel 5. Now we have an account, again, some years down the road, and we're going to mention exactly which point in time So what do you think? What do you think of this chapter, about what's happening? What stands out? What do you like? What don't you like?
Yeah, another dream.
King's partying.
Seems like
You
something's funny
got
about it.
the jewelry
Holy
Jewelry.
vessels.
cups and vessels and drinking out of.
Right, and those vessels were originally where?
And
Temple.
In the temple in Jerusalem, right. So these vessels, the instruments that they were using to eat and party with, were in fact
Holy.
or holy. They were sacred. Okay.
Well, 521 don't seem to fit right in here. This story.
521.
Verse 21.
Yeah, it looks like he's talking about the other story.
Well, he is.
He was driven from human society. He was given a mind of a wild animal. Lived among
That happened in
wild.
Nebuchadnezzar.
Yeah, it seems like it's like, why is that? It's almost
So
like
that's what happened in
Well, he's
Nebuchadnezzar.
saying you knew that, and even so.
Exactly. He's giving him a rundown of the lessons that he should
Should've
have
known
learned.
better.
Mhm. But look, you chose
Okay.
to ignore that.
that's what I missed. All right.
What else? What stands out?
Joseph had a chain of gold put around him.
Daniel.
Daniel, you have one
The
here.
symbol of power.
He knew. His countenance changed. His knees were knocking.
And that's something I actually pondered. Where's that exact verse? We're looking at verse 6.
Yeah.
In the King James, you read, "Then the king's countenance was changed, and his thoughts troubled him, so that the joints of his loins were loosed, and his knees smote one against another."
They were going to give way, and he was going to fall.
Probably lost bladder control too.
Yeah, because the knees, we know that his knees, his legs were literally shaking. But
Like he was cold.
hey, how you doing? You can come up here. There's plenty of room. Yeah, we got room over here.
Like he was cold, man.
Yeah, but that's the first expression is one that's not really used anymore in English, and I hope I have the right understanding of it, where it says that the joints of his loins were loosed. What does it literally mean?
His pants.
Where's his pants?
Yeah.
Or
He
yeah.
lost control.
Mm-hmm.
He soiled himself at that very particular moment. I mean, that talk about divine fear. And that's when I was actually reading the Spirit of Prophecy. It was specifically brought out that at times, typical fear from normal daily circumstances we may be able to suppress or control or overcome, but when that divine fear in light of the judgment, when you realize that, for example, if you're lost and it's too late for you to gain salvation, as it will be in the future, when that divine fear strikes, there's no controlling it. There's no control over it.
A lot of bedwetting.
Huh?
A lot of bedwetting.
And that's right. That's right.
So it is a little foreshadowing of the last days when we're going to be out doing our own thing, and Jesus will be coming back.
Right.
He'll be in the sky.
What's the old classic saying? Him who God wishes to destroy, he first makes mad. Fear, tremble.
Right. And we keep mentioning this in Revelation 6. We'll see that at the second coming, we're going to see these same events taking place, except to an added element that they're not just going to be staying in place, they're actually going to run. They're going to flee and try to hide. What about the writing?
The language only Daniel can understand.
Mm-hmm.
It was in his language, his own language.
I think it was Hebrew. Is that what it was?
No, not Hebrew.
It was.
It was Chaldean.
Mm-hmm.
or
But still, they
Aramaic.
couldn't understand.
Yeah, I wonder why they couldn't understand.
Well,
I wonder why God, I guess only God can understand.
where does critical thinking take place? In decision
And
making.
they were drinking all that wine.
Yeah, right here. The
Front
very
load.
first thing that the wine, that the alcohol affects, is right here. When we talk about this story and the antitype, we'll mention how in the book of Revelation, right, there is a system called spiritual Babylon, and what does she do?
Drinks the wine.
Gives it to the
free
others.
it.
Yeah.
They're drunk with the wine.
Yeah, she doesn't drink it just herself, but she leads everyone to drink of that wine, and as a result, the world is so
No,
Mesmerized.
no,
that they can't discern.
in the book it says drinking wine. Is that fermented wine or unfermented wine?
Yeah.
Well, it depends on the situation, I would guess.
It couldn't have been. It was in those vessels for years, so it had to be fermented.
When they had
There's-
their parties, they were fermented.
It can't be fresh in a vessel. They didn't pasteurize bottles and stuff.
At different times, well, again, it depends on the situation. For example, when you go to Acts chapter 2, there's a mention, you can actually check the Greek in there, it's simply mention of fresh grape juice. So you kind of have to understand the context, but when the Proverbs speak of the wine as a mocker, it's talking about what kind of wine.
Fermented.
Right, alcoholic, obviously.
Well, the Jews watered their wine, didn't they? They really made it weak.
I'm not
They
sure.
didn't drink strong wine. They drank it wet, like they cut it with water.
I'm not sure, I would have to
It
look it
was
up.
pagan to be drunk, so they watered it.
Right. Okay, what else?
That's one thing that confuses me when I speak of wine. You know, you have to read before and after to find out what the effect was.
Right. And maybe we'll come back to that point when we'll deal with the wine of Babylon in Revelation 17.
So you're saying that those words, Miki, how you say it? Miki?
Amen, tekel,
That, they are actual Aramaic words, or they-
as far as I understand, I believe that these were Chaldean words.
they are Chaldean words, and they were just too messed up to understand what was written.
Well, I mean, think about it. If we
I thought
saw
it
a
was like a
writing,
language no one knew but Daniel. I don't know.
well, the way I guess I would see that is you see four words, and at the moment that you are intoxicated, these words will appear random, numbered, weighed, given over. And to you, it's just like, what does this really mean? Until you know what this pertains to. Well, this pertains to Babylon and the end of the kingdom. Oh, then that individual word finds its meaning. But if you just put 4 random words up there in the middle of partying when you're drunk, you're not going to know what it's talking about. You know, you could if you were sober and had some godly wisdom to you, but
Yeah, but apparently they were sober.
no, they were
So they
not.
really, if they were
Apparently, godly
sober,
wisdom they didn't have either.
you know, the other people couldn't see us. They were probably drunk too.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
The
absolutely.
helpers. They had.
You can be sure. You can be sure that all of Babylon, was it just that one part of the king's palace, or was it all of Babylon? We know that it was all of Babylon that was drunk at that time. They were all partying.
That's why they took it over.
Mm-hmm. Anything else? There's something interesting with what Daniel says, actually. Let me see here. Did anyone pick up on that? There is a difference in Daniel's response when he first approaches the king, in his first address to the king. Look at verse 17. Daniel is brought in. The king exalts him in chapter 5, yes, in verse 17. The king exalts him and tells him all these great things that I've heard about you.
Let thy gifts be thyself.
Yes, can you read verse 17, Rachel?
And give thy rewards to another.
Is it chapter 5?
Chapter 5, verse 17.
Then Daniel answered and said before the king, Let thy gifts be to thyself, and give thy rewards to another. Yet I will read the writing unto the king, and make known to him the interpretation.
Now remember, we're dealing with a different king here. This is Belshazzar, this is Nebuchadnezzar. If you can remember, do you see a difference in Daniel's demeanor towards Belshazzar than the several times that we saw him approach Nebuchadnezzar in previous chapters?
More respect for Nebuchadnezzar.
Right. Let's go back to maybe chapter 2.
Okay.
Let me see here.
27?
Yeah, can you read verse 27 and 28?
Sure. Daniel answered in the presence of the king and said, The secret which the king hath demanded cannot the wise men and astrologers and magicians, the soothsayers, show unto the king? But there is a God in heaven that revealeth secrets, and maketh known to the king Nebuchadnezzar what shall be in the latter days. Thy dream and the visions of thine head upon thy bed are these.
So if we go through this, there's more respect for Nebuchadnezzar. Later, when we go to Daniel chapter 6, notice the demeanor of Daniel to Darius. Daniel chapter 6, and let's look at verse 21.
I'll live forever.
Right. He approaches the king with high respect. O king, live forever. It was a similar expression to Nebuchadnezzar. There's this heightened respect. Why doesn't he do that with Belshazzar?
Maybe he knows why and what he's doing.
That's
No, Belshazzar was gonna die.
Yeah, I think Rachel is right. When Daniel is brought in before the king, he sees the scene. He sees the vessels from the temple that are being used to do what with them?
Honor.
Blasphemy.
Use
Right,
them
they weren't just-
respectfully.
They weren't just using them disrespectfully. There's something else mentioned in Daniel 5 and verse 4. Can someone read for us, please? Daniel 5 and verse 4. They
Right.
used those vessels for a specific purpose.
right.
They drank wine and praised the gods of gold and of silver, of brass, of iron, of wood, and of stone.
Right. So this celebration, this massive feast and drinking and revelry was to do what? To glorify. It's idol worship, exactly.
Their gods.
Right. So Daniel goes in there. He understands what's going on. First, he sees the scene. Oh man, they've done it again.
Yeah.
And then what else does he see? What is everyone looking at?
The words.
Yeah, words and fire. Boom, right there on the wall.
Man.
As soon as Daniel sees those words, now mind you, this is several decades later, after he already been given the gift of being able to interpret dreams and prophecy and all those things. So he sees the words. What does he realize? Cup of iniquity is overflowing. So Daniel sees those words. He automatically understands. Okay, they're going down tonight. There's no point for me to say Belshazzar live forever because he is not going to. Unfortunately, you know. So Daniel,
I have a quick question. How long did Darius reign?
save that for next week,
Okay.
please. And we kind of see a similar thing that we saw in Daniel chapter 2, right? And then Daniel chapter 4 with the dreams, that when this writing appeared, now this time it's not a dream, it's just writing. What's the first thing that the king does in his idolatry?
He's beginning to shake.
Right after he wets himself and his knees are shaking, in order to understand this writing, what does he do?
Calls Daniel.
Before he calls Daniel.
He's trying to get his
Oh, his astrologer.
Yeah, the wise men. Now, are these the same wise men that were there in the time of Nebuchadnezzar?
No. Maybe.
Oh, they should-
Maybe some of them, right, if they were young
The
enough.
older ones.
Right, but some of them are brand new, you can be sure of that. So again, the same idea of idolatry comes out. That Belshazzar, did he learn the lessons of his father and his predecessor Nebuchadnezzar? No, which is why then Daniel, when he comes in, he gives him this long rebuke. Look, you saw even what happened to Nebuchadnezzar. He didn't want to do what the Lord was leading him to do. He lost his mind for 7 years. But God was merciful enough to bring him back to reason. So he delineated all those events, and look, you have been given this increased light, and yet you're doing even worse than they were. And so as a result, the door of mercy has closed for you. You know, I actually came across a statistic. You know how we talked about idolatry and horoscopes and whatnot? You remember that when we discussed this in Daniel chapter 2, how it's the leaders of the world of today, you know, Reagan and Bush's and all of that, and how I gave you that handout with Hillary Clinton, how she's supposedly communicating with
The dead.
Eleanor Roosevelt, right?
And have you ever seen George Obama?
George Obama?
George Obama. It's, they took and made George Bush and President Obama and mixed the faces. So this picture is George Obama.
I'll have to look it up in another
They're
time.
related.
Oh, in that
They're
sense.
related.
Yeah.
No, but you got to see the picture though.
Yeah. I'll have to take a
You
look.
You
That's
can see both
interesting.
of them.
Yeah, that's something that Walter Reif mentions quite a bit.
Yeah.
You know, this ritualistic
Bloodline
and
lineage has to be kept.
yeah, that occult idea that there's something to the physical blood, that if you keep the blood, you need to keep the blood pure and keep all these holy lines and noble lines going, which is...
That's why our next president is either going to be Jeb Bush or Jeb Bush.
Yes, time will tell. Time will tell. But I was watching the statistic how here we see that over time idolatry and this idea of palm reading and psychics and all of this was still there, and perhaps it was even more prominent. Today I saw a statistic that in 92% of all newspapers in the world, what do you find in them? Horoscope. The world is saturated with all of this. That false spiritual guidance.
Yeah,
The White House has
Lucifer.
astrologers.
Mm-hmm. What'd you say, Will?
Yeah, Lucifer is going to keep all this in play.
Mm-hmm. And to me, it's kind of interesting that the idea of astrology to define, how would you define it in one sentence?
To tell the future.
Through the
Stars.
through the stars, right? So astrology is this idea that you are looking to the stars for
Guidance.
guidance. Now we know prophetically, symbolically, what are stars? Angels, right? There's also different, the fallen angels. So to me, it's kind of interesting that astrology really is this idea of looking to the stars for guidance. And here, unknowingly, when you do this, you open up yourself to the other kind of stars, which are the fallen angels. Which to me, it's kind of interesting, you know?
Daniel also, by telling the king to keep his gifts, he wanted him to know where I got wasn't because of man.
Mm-hmm.
And I am not accepting gifts from men. If if there's anything I could offer you, it's because of the God that I know.
That's right.
So that's what I got out of that too.
And Daniel didn't accept the change and the gifts of Belshazzar. It says on here.
What does it say? Come again?
He didn't accept the gifts of Belshazzar.
Mm-hmm.
No, he didn't want him.
Right. Just like Bev said, and he wanted to give off an impression that, look, I don't need this. And at the same time, seeing the writing on the wall, he knew that,
It was finished.
whatever you're going to give me in a couple hours, it's not going to belong to any of us. It's going to belong to who?
Darius.
To Cyrus and then Darius, right, who was...
So by putting the chain and robe on him, was that like mocking him? Daniel, didn't they do that? Didn't they put the chain on his neck?
Well, no, they wanted to. He wanted to as a sign of nobility and him being exalted to a higher position. Because at this point, remember, at the time of Nebuchadnezzar, what was Daniel's position?
Prime Minister.
Yeah, sat in the gate.
Right. Sat in the gate of the king. He was the right hand of the king. However, we know that Belshazzar, because he did not, he chose to forget conveniently, he chose not to listen to the counsel and the lessons that Nebuchadnezzar had to learn. Do you think Daniel at this point had a high position within the kingdom? No, you can be sure that he was just another nobody, especially in light of the fact that here's an idolatrous king that doesn't want anything to do with the God of heaven. Who do you think would have sought and tried their best to bring Daniel down from here?
Chaldean.
Magician.
Yeah, the wise men.
And they had to go get Daniel. He wasn't in the presence of the king.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It wasn't...
It does say they put a gold chain on it and a robe.
At the end.
At the very end, right. Did Daniel want that?
No.
No, he didn't need to.
Was it like mocking then if he didn't want it?
No, I don't think so.
Force upon him?
I think that because of the sheer fact that their reason at this point is gone, what Daniel told him, they're just so overwhelmed that wow, you're able to do this. But again, who knows?
In other words, they believed what he said then.
Yeah.
Well, they had to believe him.
Yeah.
Although it kind of makes you wonder because it's not explicitly stated here that they stopped partying.
They didn't sober up.
Yeah.
They didn't sober much that fast.
Mm-hmm. And we know that very same night, according to the very end of the chapter, what took place?
He was killed.
There's the meat snuck in, right? He went under the gate. Is that how the story goes? He
Yep.
went under the gate.
Mm-hmm. We'll mention that in a little bit. Yeah, Darius with the leadership of Cyrus took over the kingdom, and so ancient Babylon.
You know, they must have
More.
knew that this guy Darius was building up. They must have knew there was a build-up.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh, that they knew that there was a war going on, which to me it's another factor too, and we'll talk about this a little bit when we discuss the anti-type of the story, because Belshazzar knew that there was a war taking place between Cyrus, who was now unifying the Medo-Persian Empire, with the kingdom of Babylon. In fact, 3 nights before the events of this chapter, there was a battle. I believe it was just like 25 miles north of the Battle of Opus, 25 miles north of Babylon, where Nabonidus had just fought with Cyrus and lost. So he knew that there was a war and that Cyrus was coming to the city to try to destroy it. But why did they feel so confident?
They had walls.
Yeah. Yeah, the walls that are as tall as the Statue of Liberty, 80
So
feet wide.
they didn't think that they could destroy it to get in.
Yeah, they thought themselves invincible and impregnable. And so while there's a war going on, instead of getting serious about the war, let's party. Let's enjoy pleasure for the sake of pleasure, which if you think about this spiritually for us, is there a lesson to be learned?
Yeah.
Because we are
Picture
in
the scene. It's like, oh, put a robe on. Oh.
Hmm.
Yeah. They ain't gonna come in. Put a robe on. Give them a chain.
But we also are in all of us, we are in a
War.
war, right? Every day is a battle. We are in a war. Now we may sit back like Belshazzar, partake and fall in love with this world, but look, all you have to do is believe it's going to end well, because clearly the Bible says Jesus will come, he will take his people to be with him. I believe it's going to be fine.
Grace.
Right. So there's a lesson for us to learn here. God's people, what are they supposed to be doing at this time?
Getting ready.
Afflicting their soul.
That's right, afflicting their souls, departing from sin, those that are living in the anti-typical Day of Atonement, which currently is everybody. Anything else from the historical account, the story, before we break it down a little bit?
How he trusts his God, the heathen.
Yeah, they trusted. Did it work out for them?
I don't know.
To me, one thing I really liked about Daniel 5 is the way that Daniel speaks in this chapter. Mind you, this is several decades removed from Daniel 1 through 4. But the way that Daniel speaks, just the way that it's worded, to me it's as if Daniel just has this absolute peace about him.
Yeah, no,
Just this tranquil demeanor, even though he knows this city is about to fall. Well, that's something I really liked about this chapter.
That's how Daniel is throughout the chapter.
Mm-hmm.
He never raises his voice.
That's right.
Doesn't get excited.
Well, he has nothing to worry about.
That's right.
He's not going to be affected. God's
Yeah.
going to take care of him.
Mm-hmm. Which
And
he
he
did.
knows that.
Okay, anything else?
When do we get into the history of the fall of Babylon?
We're going to do a little bit of that tonight. Anything else? Okay, so let me fast forward over here. Daniel 1, Daniel 2, Daniel 3, Daniel 4. Last time we talked about was the anti-type of Daniel 4 concerning the lake of fire, right? You remember how long the lake of fire?
7 years.
7 years, right. Perfect time to sin. Okay. Let's grab blue. We're in Daniel 5. Okay. Who is the first character that is mentioned in the account, in the story?
Belshazzar.
King Belshazzar, right. Who was Belshazzar?
Nebuchadnezzar's son, right?
Third son or grandson?
Not quite. Good try though.
What was that?
Who was Belshazzar? He was the son of
Nebuchadnezzar.
son of Nebuchadnezzar, is what Rachel said.
That's what the Bible says. Grandson?
No, it says
Well, when the Bible in this chapter, you may have noticed that it refers to Nebuchadnezzar as the father of Belshazzar. But in those days, to say that, especially in the line of kings, to say that someone was your father Does it mean that he was your literal father? No, it gives off the connotation that he was one of your predecessors on the throne. In fact, we're going to mention that, again, Belshazzar was the son of who? Not Nebuchadnezzar, but Nabonidus. Nabonidus was his father. Nabonidus, in fact, when I give this out to you, maybe I'll pass it out right now. Nabonidus actually wrote...
Where is Nabonidus?
I'm sorry?
Where is Nabonidus?
Nabonidus is not mentioned in this chapter.
He's not mentioned anywhere, is he?
Okay. Grab one and pass it around, please. But Belshazzar was the son of Nabonidus. Nabonidus, I keep forgetting whether it was, I think it was in the Nabonidus Chronicle that you see on here, specifically wrote of himself as having come from unimportant origins, that he was not of a kingly line. Most likely, actually, him and his mother and family came from Haran in Assyria, off to the west. Yeah, actually what happened is, let me write this down here. Let's do a little chronology of the kingdom of Babylon to kind of break this down and make this pretty clear. The first king of the Neo-Babylonian Empire that we know about, who really conquered the world as we know it, was who?
Nimrod?
Do you remember?
Oh, it was, we talking about the Assyrians?
I'm talking about around the time of 605 BC.
Oh, okay. Nabopolassar?
Right, Nabopolassar.
Polassar.
I'm saying that right. He was the father of?
Nabopolassar was the father of Nabopolassar. Yeah, that's good. Nabopolassar.
He was the father of the one that we discussed for the first 4 chapters, right? Nebuchadnezzar. Nabopolassar was the father, and he really was the one that began this process of unifying the world under the leadership of Babylon. Nebuchadnezzar is the one that really brought Babylon to the forefront as this great worldly kingdom. Nebuchadnezzar reigned from 605 to 562 BC. Are we going to see Nebuchadnezzar again?
No.
Yes, we're going to see him
We're going to see him where?
in heaven.
In heaven, right.
Yeah, that's right. He made it.
We will see him in heaven when he is resurrected.
But why?
Because he
He
repented
accepted
himself.
Jesus.
Because he repented and he accepted the truth.
But I thought he didn't.
Satan doesn't. Nebuchadnezzar, the last thing we know, Rachel, actually, can you read for me Daniel 4 and verse 37?
Daniel 4, verse 37. Now I, Nebuchadnezzar, play and exalt and honor the King of heaven, all whose works are true and his ways judgment, and those that walk in pride he is able to subvert.
Okay, so the last thing we know of Nebuchadnezzar is, what is he doing?
Praise God.
That's right. He gave his heart to the Lord.
But it took him so many times to get it.
Hello.
Does it take us any less times?
No.
Right. And we have even more
No.
knowledge and light and truth, which means that the responsibility on our part is that much greater than
That's
Nebuchadnezzar.
the evil what?
Marduk.
Forgot a K there. The next one, the actual son of Nebuchadnezzar was, there's 2 names for him, Evil Merodach or Abel Marduk. And actually, can you guys turn to Jeremiah chapter 52? This is something me and Dave we've been talking about a little bit.
Gave him that name, right?
Yes.
I'm already there.
And he was, again, the son of Nebuchadnezzar. He reigned from 562 to 560
What verse
BC.
was it?
It's Jeremiah 52. We're going to look at verses 31 and 34, where as soon as this guy, Amon Marduk or Evil Merodach, comes on the scene, comes onto the throne after the death of Nebuchadnezzar, he does something that Nebuchadnezzar never did.
Jeremiah what?
Jeremiah 52, verses 31 to 34.
And it came. Wait.
That's right.
Very good. And it came to pass in the 7th and 13th year of the captivity of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, in the 12th month, in the
Jeremiah 52.
in the 5 and 20th day of the month, that evil king of Babylon, in the first year of his reign, lifted up the head of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, and brought him forth out of prison, and spake kindly unto him, and set his throne above the throne of the kings that were with him in Babylon, and changed his prison garments, and he did continually eat bread before him all the days of his life, and for his diet there was continual and for his diet given him of the king of Babylon every day of 14 until the day of his death and all the days of his life.
Okay. So while Nebuchadnezzar was on the scene, what was the last king of Judah, Jehoiakim? He was taken captive and he was thrown in prison, right? When evil Merodach comes on the scene, the first thing he does, he takes Jehoiakim out of prison. Look, you're a king, let's be buddies. And so, unfortunately, Jehoiakim, what should he have done?
He should have said no.
He should have said, no, right, I don't want to be associated with you, or at least I don't want to partake of the food that you are giving me because this is offered unto idols. So you can see how that captivity of Jehoiakim, again, influenced the mind a little bit. But that was, again, the son of Nebuchadnezzar. And then what happened is Nebuchadnezzar's son-in-law, by the name of Neriglissar, I'm not sure if I ever say these things right. And he actually is mentioned in the Bible under another name, Nergal-Sharezer. If I'm saying that correctly.
Like Nebuchadnezzar.
Mm-hmm. Right, and he was the son-in-law of Nebuchadnezzar. After 2 years of being on the throne of evil Merodach, the son-in-law, Neriglissar, actually conspired and killed evil Merodach. He wanted to take the throne for himself. And so he now comes onto the throne. And if somebody can look up for us Jeremiah 39 and verse 13, that's what he's actually mentioned. Jeremiah 39 and verse 13. And that's the account of that final siege of Jerusalem under Nebuzaradan, the general of Nebuchadnezzar. Jeremiah 39:13. There's a mention of Nergal-Sharezer. Verse 13.
Go ahead.
Try it.
Rachel, go for it.
Okay, fine. Nebuchadnezzar, the captain of the guard, sent the
Nebuchadnezzar.
Nebuchadnezzar
Rabasarius.
and Caesar, and all the king of Babylon's princes.
Right. So what it's really pointing out is there was just a tiny little list of all of the major captains under the general Nebuzaradan, and here is where this guy Neriglissar, the son-in-law of Nebuchadnezzar, at the time of the destruction of Jerusalem, is mentioned in Jeremiah 39:13.
What's the LAB?
Labashi Marduk is the next king.
Labashi.
Actually, we don't know. History doesn't tell us what happened to Neriglissar. Perhaps he died in battle or something, but I was not able to find exactly what happened to him anywhere. The next king that came on the scene was Labashi Marduk, and he was the son of Neriglissar. However, and this is what kind of tells me that most likely Neriglissar lost his life in one way or another, because when he came on the scene, Labashi Marduk was only a small boy when he was crowned king. He was not of age yet. He didn't even hit puberty yet, and so as a result, was he fit to rule?
No.
No. So what actually happened is, with some of the ruling elite within Babylon, they conspired together, and for the sake of Babylon itself, they said, look, this guy's too young. He can't do this. He's going to drive this empire down to the ground. So they conspired, killed him, killed the boy, and this was when Nabonidus. 1 second, Rachel.
Okay.
And this is when Nabonidus
Who is that?
was chosen to be the next king of Babylon. Nabonidus.
Somehow Nebuchadnezzar seemed to have died at the fall of Jerusalem, like the time. Like he died.
The first time that Nebuchadnezzar went through Jerusalem.
But Nebuchadnezzar took his place, but it seemed like he died right at the destruction time.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
Right, Rachel.
It kind of reminds me of like the story of the boy Joash, the boy king, when he was only crowned 7 years old.
Right.
How old was the?
How old? I'm not sure, but history tells us that he was a small boy, perhaps 5, 6, 7 years old. Probably
The
not
other
more.
one was qualified because he listened to his counselors.
True.
He was a good king. The other child.
Which one?
Joash.
Oh, Joash. Yes,
About.
yes, absolutely.
Except he made some bad decisions later on, but.
Okay, so next was Nabonidus. Nabonidus was the actual king. And this is where, as we mentioned previously, history up until really the mid-1800s was looking with scorn upon, especially the book of Daniel, because there was no historical account whatsoever of Belshazzar, the king Belshazzar. There was an indication of Nabonidus and these previous kings, but there was no mention of Belshazzar, so they kept laughing. Well, look, the Bible is a fairy tale because history, the archaeological account, it doesn't support this. And this is why I gave you guys this handout. That now, according to archaeology itself, we know, according to the Nabonidus Chronicles and the Cylinder, we have a delineation of events which actually mention Belshazzar, the son of Nabonidus.
Wow, they got the name now.
Mm-hmm. Right, can someone, I'm on the page with the Cylinder.
Okay.
Right, can someone read that top paragraph for us? You don't need to read the things in parentheses. You'll go crazy. Just the top paragraph, please.
For many years, Belshazzar was an enigma for historians. The book of Daniel states that he was a king the night that Babylon fell. It says that his father was Nebuchadnezzar. Prior to 1854, archaeologists and historians knew nothing of Belshazzar outside the book of Daniel. Indeed, while the Deuterocanonical book of Baruch and the writings of Josephus do mention Belshazzar, the references to Belshazzar in these works are ultimately dependent on the book of Daniel. Both Xenophon and Herodotus recount the fall of Babylon to Cyrus the Great. Yet neither of these writers give the name of the king of Babylon. Additionally, both Berosus and Ptolemy's king lists have Nabonidus as the last king of Babylon, with no mention of Belshazzar.
Right, and Rich, can you read that part on the bottom of what the Cylinder states concerning Belshazzar, please?
As for me, Nabonidus, king of Babylon, save me from sinning against you, your great Godhead, and grant me as the present life long of days. And as for Belshazzar, the eldest son, my offspring, instill reverence for your great Godhead in his heart, and may he not commit any cultic mistakes. May he be sated with a life of plenitude.
So again, archaeology proves the Bible true. And I wrote here that Nabonidus wrote there himself that he was of unimportant origins. Because history tells us that, again, who was the king in Daniel 5 that is mentioned? Belshazzar, right. But we know that Nabonidus was the highest ruler in Babylon. And there is really, if you think about it logically, there is support to this idea of what Nabonidus said about himself, that he came from unimportant origins. And it is the fact that in 553, does anyone know or remember what Nabonidus did? What did he do? 3 years into his rule. Does anyone remember? He was on the throne for 3 years.
And he walked away from the throne and he went to study religion.
Right. In 553, Nabonidus went to the very important oasis of Tema. And this is really what gives me the support for this idea that he was not of the kingly line, because history and these accounts tell us that Nabonidus, the Babylonian Empire, they had their own gods. For example, Marduk, as was mentioned in some of these names, the sun god Marduk. However, Nabonidus was still attached to those Assyrian origins. He was still in love with the Assyrian gods, not the Babylonian ones. When he came to power, he was exalting the Assyrian gods over the established gods of Babylon, including Marduk. And so as a result, this created conflict within Babylon itself, which made it a very logical thing for Nabonidus to do, is to look, I'm going to leave my son in charge. I'm going to go to the oasis of Tema, which is one of the most important oases there in the Middle East. It was like the crossroads of many. It was like the crossroads of many trade routes. It was a very important place to control. So it was very logical for him to look, in order to not upset and divide the empire, I'm going to leave my son Belshazzar in charge. While I'm going to let him oversee this, I'm going to go over to this oasis of Tema and devote myself to the study, the worship, and the service of the Assyrian moon god called Sin.
Which goes back 4,000 years and now.
Alright, so he goes to oasis of Tema to serve.
Mesopotamian is that sun god, that moon god too. The Mesopotamian or
What's considered the oldest religion?
I don't know.
I mean, excluding the true one?
Yeah, you go back. Well, Syrians, they got 4,000 years BC. They go back. Their religion.
Ultimately, where did it all start?
In that area.
We know where.
Nimrod,
right. It started in the original Babylon. The original sun worship. Yes, Rachel?
It was destroyed that time.
Now, why did who we're talking about leave his son in charge? And did they ever see each other after that, or no?
History doesn't tell us if they did or not. I would say most likely that they did. I don't think you're going to go, you're talking about 15 years without seeing your son once.
So that information was off of this clay?
About the oasis?
Yeah.
That's actually mentioned on the, if you flip the page on the Nabonidus Chronicle, I actually highlighted some parts over there on the very bottom. It's the Nabonidus Chronicle that depicts and specifically mentions that Nabonidus went to this oasis of Tema to devote himself to this moon god Sin.
Wow, that's a great thing to find.
Yeah.
That's why they're saying they keep a lot of this stuff quiet. They have the information, they just don't put it out.
And so he left Belshazzar as co-regent and overseer of Babylon itself.
Wait, so he was king?
He was the true king. But he left Belshazzar in charge.
Now, I read in the Dead Sea book I have it said that Nebuchadnezzar they found in the Dead Sea Scrolls, and he's accredited with the destruction of Jerusalem. The father was given the credit back in the Dead Sea writings, but they didn't mention the Nebuchadnezzar.
I'll have to check that out.
Yeah, look.
I didn't hear about that.
But there's so much of that they don't want to put out either.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Or they put out so many things to confuse you so that you don't know exactly what is truth. Okay. So Belshazzar is left in charge, and what does he do in Daniel 5? Lets it rip. He lets it rip. That's right. In principle, what does Belshazzar do?
Goes against God.
He goes against God because he takes those holy vessels from the temple in Jerusalem that was destroyed, and he uses them for a
Party.
party. For what kind of a purpose?
Mockery,
God.
worship, mockery, whatever.
Right, so I just mentioned that there's an issue of the holy
Mixed with the unholy.
and the common. In principle, this is one of the great abominations in the eyes of the Lord. To take something that which he has set aside as holy, which is sacred to him, especially when he specifically, explicitly stated that, and use that which is holy for a common purpose.
I sometimes get upset because they have such common names for God. Instead of using it like a holy name, they make it so common. It's upsetting.
Which in turns, what are you really doing at that point? When you're speaking God's name or one of the names that he uses with, just as a
Yes.
yeah, you're taking it in vain. If you don't give it that proper respect and reverence. God's name is holy.
And didn't they change the pen when the scribes were writing the Bible? They changed the name when they came to God's name.
Oh my God.
To
Well,
show how holy he
That's
is.
why it says Lord and not Jehovah, right? All the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think ancient Israel perhaps took it a little bit too far. That they didn't even want to mention the name Jehovah or Yahweh because they thought it was too sacred to mention. But no, God wants us to still talk about him, to speak of him. Yes, his holiness, his love, and his reverence. And I think they took it too far. However, what you point out is right, because I do like the fact that when the Bible in the Hebrew was copied hand by hand, they didn't have typewriters and computers and all of that, obviously. Rich?
About these people that refer to him as the man upstairs. And I've heard priests, Catholic priests, do that too.
Well, that tells you that person...
From the pulpit.
I get upset when they say the man upstairs.
Does that when a person says that, is that an indication that they really know who they are talking about?
Yeah,
No. If they really understood who God is, and his nature, his glory, majesty, and power and love, then they would never say that.
Referring to him as a man.
Yeah, that's a big thing in here.
That's an abomination right
Yeah.
there in and of itself.
Yeah, bringing him down from his rightful place. But Anna pointed out something important. I think Michael Rood mentions on one of his videos that when the scriptures in the Hebrew were copied in the times of ancient Israel, anytime they would actually come upon the name of the Lord, those four letters, Yod He Vav He, which if you see that the name Lord in the King James Version in capital letters, that's where those four letters are used, Jehovah. When they came to that name, every single time they came upon it, before they copied that name, doesn't matter if in the next 5 verses that name was there 10 times, each time they came upon the name, they stopped, they prayed, they washed their hands, they prayed again, they wrote the name, Yod He Vav He, then they prayed again, and continued writing the scriptures. So if 2 words later, the name of God comes up, they have to go through that same process, because that's the kind of reverence they didn't really attach, but they understood the reverence and the holiness of the Lord. Which to me, it's kind of an interesting thing.
Yeah, why do they wash their hands?
Hold on, let Rachel speak, please.
Was that a good thing or a bad thing that they did each time?
I kind of look upon it favorably.
I'm kind of confused.
I think it's better than not attach enough importance to the name.
Oh, okay.
I don't know, what do you guys think?
I don't think you can show too much reverence.
I agree.
Mm-hmm.
I agree. You can't do
In the right context. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. But here, Belshazzar takes the holy, uses it for a common purpose. Is there a danger for us to do that?
Yes.
Let's break the same principle.
The
How
Bible.
so?
I don't think we respect the Bible enough. And how holy it is. God is the one that dictated.
Right. How can we use that which is holy for a common purpose?
Sanctuary.
Sanctuary. What about the sanctuary?
Amen.
Public meetings in there.
The church, yes.
Right. The sanctuary is supposed to represent what?
God's presence.
Yeah, it represents the very throne room of the Lord. The mouthpiece of the Lord, the one who speaks, is supposed to represent, is a type of Christ himself. We know that when we come into the sanctuary, it is just a rehearsal of that time when we will actually get to meet and come before the Lord himself and bow down and throw on our crowns before him.
And our dress has to be according to that.
Right.
Our behavior.
Yes, and when it comes to worship in the sanctuary, we have to understand, look, this is a sacred time. It is a holy time. It is a holy place, which means there's to be a specific kind of demeanor and atmosphere. We can't bring in worldly music, worldly entertainment, worldly type of speech or ideas at that time, because it is a sacred time and a sacred place.
Wait, so do you mean like when we close the blinds, that's a bad idea? Or bad thing to do? And pull the screen down and stuff like that?
What do you guys think?
Yes?
Well, you're closing off the Lord.
In and of itself, I wouldn't take it too far. I do believe that at times, something can be presented on the screen that is appropriate, but I think a lot of times it's not done. I think a lot of times the things that are actually played on there are not appropriate for the place itself. How else? What else can we do?
Sabbath.
Sabbath. What about the Sabbath?
It's a holy day.
Right, the Lord tells us in Isaiah 58 that during the Sabbath you are to do what?
Rest.
It is a day of rest.
Guard the edges of the Sabbath from doing your own pleasure.
Yeah, Michelle, can you look that up for us, please? We're supposed to turn from our thoughts, from our daily troubles, from our daily cares, the common things that we do on a regular basis throughout the week. It is a time of 24 hours of
Separation from the world.
Separation from the world and close communion with the Lord. So I don't like to say rest too many times. It is a day of rest, but not a day of rest as in where I'm just going to sleep the entire day. The rest comes from what?
Worldly things.
The spiritual rest.
Right. The rest comes from the fellowship, from being in the presence of the Lord, from communing with him. You get that peace and that fulfillment, and that's what really gives you that rest. It's not. I don't believe that the rest is a time when we're supposed to I'm just going to sleep half the day. I don't believe that's godly rest. I think that's laziness.
Spend time in his other book, nature.
Right.
Ready? Do you want that?
Go ahead, please.
If thou turn away thy foot from the Sabbath, from doing thy pleasure on my holy day, and call the Sabbath a delight, the holy of the Lord, honorable, and shalt honor him, not doing thine own ways, nor finding thine own pleasure, nor speaking thine own words. Do you want verse 14?
Yes, please.
Then shalt thou delight thyself in the Lord, and I will cause thee to ride upon the high places of the earth, and feed thee with the heritage of Jacob thy father, for the mouth of the Lord hath spoken it.
Okay. Now, with this principle, can the opposite be also true?
Yes, sure.
Can you is it an abomination in the eyes of the Lord to take that which is common and use it for a holy purpose?
Absolutely. The Pharisees did some of that. They overdid it, and they made it a burden instead of a delight.
Right. Let's go to Leviticus 10 really quick. Just read a couple verses of the story. You should all know what this is about. The story of two young men, right?
Leviticus what?
Leviticus 10 verses 1 through 9.
I'm there.
The story of
Nadab
Nadab and Abihu, the sons of Aaron. Leviticus chapter 10 verses 1 through 9. If someone could read for us, please.
And it came to pass on the 8th day that Moses called Aaron and his sons and the elders of Israel. And he said unto Aaron, Take thee a young calf for a sin offering, and a ram for a burnt offering, without blemish, and offer them before the Lord. And unto the children of Israel thou shalt... Nope, that's 9, sorry.
Where are we? One of them.
And Nadab and Abihu, the sons of Aaron, took either of them his censer, and put fire therein, and put incense thereon, and offered strange fire before the Lord, which he commanded them not. And there went out fire from the Lord, and devoured them, and they died before the Lord. And Moses said unto Aaron, This is it that the Lord spake, saying, I will be sanctified in them that come nigh me, and before all the people I will be glorified. And Aaron held his peace. And Moses called Mishael and Elzaphan, the sons of Uzziel, the uncle of Aaron, and said unto them, Come near, carry your brethren from before the sanctuary out of the camp. So they went near and carried them in their coats out of the camp, as Moses had said. And Moses said unto Aaron, and unto Eleazar, and unto Ithamar his sons, Uncover not your heads, neither rend your clothes, lest ye die, and lest wrath come upon all the people. But let your brethren and the whole house of Israel bewail the burning which the Lord hath kindled. How far? 10?
To 9.
And ye shall not go out from the door of the tabernacle of the congregation, lest ye die, for the anointing oil of the Lord is upon you. And they did according to the word of Moses. And the Lord spake unto Aaron, saying, Do not drink wine nor strong drink, thou nor thy sons with thee, when ye go into the tabernacle of the congregation, lest ye die. It shall be a statute forever throughout your generation.
And actually, please do 10.
And that ye may put difference between holy and unholy, and between unclean and clean.
Okay. So what did Nadab and Abihu do?
They gave sacrifices that they weren't supposed to and they returned.
And specifically, what did they put in their censer?
Strange fire.
Right, strange fire meaning...
It wasn't authorized.
Right, it wasn't the one that was authorized. It was simply just common fire from maybe a bonfire off to the side of you, and the Lord specifically instructed them, only take the one that I instruct you to. Rich?
Verse 3. And there went out fire from the Lord, devoured them, and they died before the Lord. Explain that. God doesn't kill.
Just like Uzzah, he wasn't supposed to touch it.
You know, I think about that a lot, and I think it was all paid for by the death of the son.
It was what?
Justified by the death of the son. What God had killed in the Old Testament and all that.
God doesn't kill.
He destroys the wicked.
The answer is in the book of Revelation. I love Revelation. Find all the answers there.
You got an answer, bro.
Alright, what chapter?
Revelation verse 20.
Okay, I'm there.
And this is, we're going to look at verses 8 and 9. This is when the city has come down, the wicked are resurrected, and now the Lord, Satan gathers them around the holy city in order to try to overtake it. The Lord then shows to every single person, as we mentioned before, the record of their lives while they are not in the city. They fall prostrate, glorify the Lord, and say, Just and true are thy ways of King of Saints. And then look at verse 9. And they went up on the breadth of the earth and compassed the camp of the saints about and the beloved city, and fire came down from God out of heaven and devoured them. We already breached this subject a little bit, but we know God is not kind of like, Zeus is depicted, striking somebody with a thunderbolt. God is not going to do that. Why do the people burn? Why does the fire appear? In light of the fact that God at this point has done what above the city?
They've been judged.
What did he do with himself? He reveals himself in the fullness of the brightness of his glory. And so because these people have sin on them, sin is devoured in that fiery presence of the Lord, and it consumes them. So to me, going back to Leviticus chapter 10, when I'm thinking about this, when these guys went into the holy place, perhaps at that very moment, it's interesting because the only thing that I can conclude there is when they went into the holy place and offered the strange fire.
They were sin.
Yeah, they were sinning.
They were sinning.
They were sinning, and so as a result.
So that makes sense then.
in the
God
presence of the
revealed
Lord.
himself, and then
Right, and God revealed himself, and look, the Shekinah glory perhaps at that time was there, and as a result, because of their sin, the sin itself devoured them. The fiery presence
because
consumed them.
he can't kill, because if he does kill, he's a hypocrite.
Mhm.
Because he tells us not to kill.
Not to murder,
So
right?
if he tells us not to kill, and he does it, then he's a hypocrite.
He
He's
has,
not a hypocrite because he doesn't kill.
but he has ordered the whole people's exterminated.
And you can't mix the two.
We're gonna have to discuss that another time. I'm sorry, guys.
Okay.
But there is a perfectly biblical answer to all of that. It's
I
just
just think the death of the Son paid for that. It paid for our sins, or covered that end of it.
it's just normally we have a thought that, or perhaps there's that impression that well, the fire came down from the Lord, so these guys, it's all of a sudden this pillar of fire just and just consumed these guys. But I don't believe that's exactly what happened. They were in a holy place, and because of their sin, they were consumed because of the brightness of the Lord's glory. Now, there's something in verse 9 that gives us one of the reasons that they may have gotten things a little bit mixed up. What's the reason in verse 9? Because clearly their judgment was off. They knew that they were supposed to use holy fire, they used common. What could have hindered that judgment?
Maybe strong drink.
I believe so.
Well, they do that in the Catholic Church today.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, there's somebody a priest say to someone, "Oh, we keep the good wine for last." That means.
I heard one story of how there was a recovering alcoholic that went to the service, and because they were passing around fermented drink, he partook of it and went right back to his life of alcoholism.
Yeah.
Because of that.
Sure.
So yeah, we got to be careful.
Yeah, alcohol is touchy.
Yeah, but these verses 8, 9, and 10, and 11 are clearly in relation to what had just happened. And the Lord's reminding them, look, do not drink strong drink. You're going to lose your ability to judge correctly and critically think, which is why these guys now put strange fire, and in their drunkenness went into the holy place and got themselves killed.
Wait, what is strange fire?
The common fire, the regular fire.
Like they started it with regular fire,
They didn't use God's fire. They used, let's say, if you were to, light up a bunch of matchsticks outside and then use that fire and put that in your censer. That's kind of what they did.
It's like heat with a bad ground.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Heat.
Okay.
So clearly, the opposite is also true. We cannot use that which is common for a holy purpose. In relation to the end of time, is this something that we are going to see? In what way?
In our own sanctuaries.
In our sanctuaries, we're already seeing it, right? Perhaps with music, using common worldly music for a holy purpose, even though they try to attach some good words in them.
Or using
Common dress.
Mm-hmm. Ah, that's interesting. Watering down the language of the Bible to that, to a common level.
It always occurs in times.
What about the final conflict? That's really what we're leading up to. How will these principles here be brought out and demonstrated?
Satan's impersonation.
Okay, that's one way. When he personates Christ, he's going to present himself, because he is wickedness, he is profane, he's going to present himself as the righteous one. What else? What about the people and the governments? What are they going to do? They're going to restrict freedom of conscience, are they not? Mm-hmm. And what will be the special focus?
Sabbath.
Right, so they're going to use what kind of a day?
Sabbath.
They're going to take a common day and present it as a holy day, and they will take the day that is holy and bring it down to the level of a common day.
Feinstein's been calling for that. Ms. Feinstein, politician, she's been calling for a day of
Family day. Family day.
Yeah, a lot of these guys are ready for it. We're just waiting for the events that we've been studying in the trumpets, or at least God's waiting for us to get ready so that he can allow these things to happen. Because he needs his people to have victory over sin. But again, we're going to see this in the final conflict exemplified in clarity. With me so far? Okay. So Let's go back to Daniel 5. And take this a little bit further. And we're going to look at verse 5. Daniel 5 and verse 5. And if someone could read for us, please. Daniel 5 and verse 5.
In the same hour came forth fingers of a man's hand and wrote over against the candlestick upon the plaster of the wall of the king's palace. The king saw the part of the hand that wrote.
Okay.
That had to be scary in itself. All of a sudden there's a hand,
Oh, yeah.
just a hand.
Now you can probably most likely that hand was made of fire, writing in fire. You can't explain it. But when it says in the King James, in that same hour, what does it mean? Does it mean, okay, well, 50 minutes later, but in that same hour? What does it mean? Does someone have another version? Actually, Dave, can you read from yours?
Suddenly they saw the fingers of a human hand writing on the plaster wall of the king's palace.
So it says, suddenly, at that very moment when they used the holy for a common purpose, when they desecrated that which God had made holy, that is when, that same moment, that hand appears and starts writing, judgment is pronounced. Okay, so what was the writing? What did it say? Can someone actually read that for us?
Meaning, tekel.
And?
You parson.
Oh yeah, you parson.
Almost like an abracadabra.
Many. Tekel, you farce. Okay, according to the Bible, the overall interpretation is, what did these words mean?
Perez.
Sorry, what?
Meaning, tekel, or you parson. And then it says Perez.
What does it mean?
He's numbered.
Kingdom divided.
Okay, so many means that the kingdom has been numbered. What does it mean that something is numbered, that the kingdom is numbered?
Days are numbered.
Which means that a time has come.
Time's up.
That's right, time's up. An end has been proclaimed. How so? Because somebody has, we know that
over the line.
the cup of iniquity has been reached, and the being in heaven, the entity who is God himself, the God of heaven, what did he do? He has judged, right? He has judged the king and the kingdom of Babylon. And what was the result of the judgment? They were found
Guilty.
lacking.
Wanting.
They were found lacking righteousness.
Now, why? I have a question.
Uh-huh.
In verse 25, it says, many tekel upharsin. 26 says many, 27 says tekel, 28 switches to Perez.
Yeah, I know that there's two words for upharsin. I think it's just one is in the Aramaic and one is in Chaldean. I'm pretty sure that's where the difference comes from. Okay, so they are judged and found lacking righteousness, even though they've been given plenty of time, plenty of warnings and lessons and light in order to come to the God of heaven, accept His truth, and as a result, well, what's supposed to happen that very night?
His kingdom would be over.
And it's given to?
The Medes and the Persians.
Divided. Divided time.
Okay. Numbered. Time has come for the end because you have been judged, found lacking, and as a result, I will give your kingdom over to somebody else whom perhaps I can use, since you are not allowing me to use you. It was a different story with Nebuchadnezzar, because eventually he came around, but this guy, he just so hardened himself that, well, that's it.
Yeah, this guy didn't bring him back.
Okay, let me hand this out. I'm going to grab one. Pass it around, please.
You know what's interesting? You know what's interesting, Pete? Is Daniel proclaimed the end of Belshazzar's kingdom. That he turns around and rewards it.
Right.
You would think he'd be so upset he might do something rare.
Especially in light of how lifted up these kings were.
Because he was so arrogant.
Mm-hmm.
You know, who do you think you are telling me my kingdom's going to end? Off with his head.
I guess it must have been partly the wine.
God kept it from happening.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
I think the parents were in there too.
I'm sorry?
I think the parents were involved in their attitude.
Oh, and how they were brought up? Oh, absolutely.
Spoiled.
I'm sure. Mm-hmm. Yeah, come on, you have everything. No need of anything. Everyone is a subject under you.
And praised continually.
Yeah. Without the God of heaven, yeah, you're going to develop incredible pride and arrogance. You can be sure
Your
of that.
God. Your God.
Okay. What I gave you guys is 2 pages from the book The Two Babylons by Alexander Hislop. It's pages 93 and 94. And if you've never read that book, even though it's written in slightly older English structure, it may be a little difficult to read, but if you haven't read it, I would encourage you to do so. It's absolutely amazing.
19th century work? Or?
Yeah, he was in the mid-1800s.
They really did good work in it.
Mm-hmm. And this section actually kind of deals with the origins of Christmas and Easter and whatnot, and then some of these other ideas. But we're going to talk about the very fact in Daniel 5, one word is mentioned twice, right? Many, many. Now you would think that if this means, well, the Lord has numbered your days, you would think that the Lord didn't really need to repeat himself. Okay, just say many once, tekel upharsin, and you've been numbered, found wanting, and your kingdom is given over. But I believe that there is a reason why many is mentioned twice. It's a very profound reason. So look at the first page where it says the two Babylons at the top, and can someone read for us the second paragraph?
Sharon Turner.
Mm-hmm.
Sharon Turner, Cities
Starts.
on the Arabic poem, which proves that a female sun and a masculine moon were recognized in Arabia as well as by the Anglo-Saxons.
Wait a minute.
It must have been birthday of the Lord Moon, therefore, and out of the sun that was celebrated by them on the 25th of December, even as the birthday of the same Lord Moon was observed by the Arabians on the 25th of December. The name of the Lord Moon in the east seems to have been many, for this appear the most natural interpretation of the divine statement in Isaiah 11. But ye are they that forsake my holy mountain, that prepare a temple for Gad, and that furnish the drink offering unto many. There is reason to believe that Gad refers to the sun god, and that many in like manner designates the moon divinity.
Right. And here we're talking about the Babylonian gods. You remember with Nabonidus, he was all about the Assyrian gods. Their moon god was called Sin. In Babylon, the moon god was referred to as many. And there's a reason the many and the many, it's really the E and the I. It's really just a small difference between the Hebrew and the Chaldean also. But the many was the Babylonian moon god. And we know that the kings at that time, again, what did they think themselves to be? Right, godmen. So Belshazzar, in his desire for self-exaltation, really saw himself as this moon god. I am a god. Worship me. And so if you really think about when they did this feast in honor of their gods, one of the people, first and foremost, that was glorified at that time was Belshazzar himself. And I don't know if you guys remember, but when we go back to Isaiah 65, if you could turn there really quick, in verse 11, even though the King James doesn't translate it this exact way, but in the Hebrew, Isaiah 65 actually references these two Babylonian entities. We're going to look at verse 11.
Isaiah 65?
Isaiah 65.
That ye may suck and be satisfied with the breasts
Isaiah 65:11.
Yeah.
Well, ye are they that forsake the Lord, that forget my holy mountain, that prepare a table for that
Oh.
troop, and that furnish the drink offering unto that number.
66. I was 66.
The Lord's rebuking his people at this present time because they're departing from his righteousness, from his truth. In the Hebrew, the word for troop is the word G-A-D, God, the one that we just mentioned right here in the book 2 of the two Babylons. It was the name of the sun god of Babylon. The literal actual meaning is troop, or an army, the god of the armies, but that was his name, the name of the Babylonian sun god. And where it says number at the very end of that verse, it actually uses that Hebrew word many, M-E-N-I, which literally translates number, because the moon god, one of his names in Babylon was that he was a numberer. He was the judge, the one who numbered people's days. Does that make sense? So, in other words, what's really happening here in Daniel 5, the reason why many was mentioned twice was because Belshazzar was setting himself up as the judge, the number of the people, the moon god himself. So the Lord was literally saying here, look, you have set yourself up as a god, as the many. You think you are the judge and the number of all the peoples in the world because you control the world? No, I am the true God of heaven, and you, O numberer, are now yourself being numbered. Does that make sense? You as a judge are now being judged. You are found lacking in righteousness, and your kingdom is given over to the Medes and the Persians. And that's really the reason as to why the many is mentioned twice. Nothing is in the Bible by accident. You with me?
The moon was a clock, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Now, what I find interesting is that that many was, you know, you would think that a male, if he's going to think of himself as a god, would think of himself as a male god. But many, the moon god, was actually female. It was a female deity.
What? Pete, the moon? Did you say the moon god was a female deity?
Yeah, that's right. That goes back to Babylonian.
And if you remember, I mentioned this before when we went through this, that it was a female deity that was often represented by an item. Do you remember what that was?
Like a crescent.
Many was a female deity that was often represented by a cup itself, or, and think Revelation now, or holding
Holding a cup.
a cup
All right.
in her hand.
A cup.
That's on the Vatican coin.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. All right, we'll study and we'll mention this in the anti-type of this story, that in the book of Revelation we know that right now there is a system on earth that is represented in Bible prophecy, and even as Rich points out, in the back of their official coins represents itself as a female holding a cup. The cup is filled with what?
Abomination.
It's filled with wine, which are the abominations of spiritual Babylon.
Yeah, we gotta get into that hat too.
Into what?
That hat.
The hat.
The hat. They got a hat.
Phrygian hat.
No, a hat with a little dimple on the end.
That's the Phrygian hat.
Yeah.
That's the hat. of
Jacobin
Mithra.
hat, yeah.
That's Mithra.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it came from Rome.
Yeah.
That's on the emblem on the
Like a fez hat?
the armed forces. No, it's not a fez.
That's on the armed forces too.
It's on the armed forces.
You're talking about the Jacobin
On the
hat,
armed-
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Has anyone ever watched the Smurfs when you were younger, or let your kids
Yeah.
watch the
That's what it
Smurfs?
is. So
What kind of hats do they all have?
There's a
Yeah.
there's a monument out on Long Island.
Yeah.
My niece took me over there,
It's a hat.
and it's right in the middle of the circle at a
Yeah,
state
right
park.
on the top it's got a
And on
little,
the monument,
got a little
there's
thing
a
in there.
Phrygian hat.
Wow.
And I told her, I said,
Oh.
this, I told her what it was. I said, go on the internet and look it up. Couldn't believe it. I said, yeah, that's what it is.
Do you guys know what they're talking about? The Phrygian or the Jacobin hat?
It was the
Oh, the hat
hat,
of
it
the
was the hat that
Revolutionary?
they used in the French Revolution.
French,
yeah.
Yeah, it's like this pointed
Oh, yeah,
hat
yeah.
with a curved
Yeah,
little
it's
tip
sort
at the
looks like
very
it's
end.
got a
Sort of a floppy hat.
Looks like a sock is on it.
That's like a flop on the top.
If you want to see it, I'll let you see it on the screen later. But anyways, that's.
do with the moon? No.
No, that's something for another story. But again, we'll come back to this point that this moon god Mene was a female deity that was represented either by a cup or holding a cup, which is great connotation prophetically for the end of time. And this is exactly what Belshazzar was doing. God tells him, look, you think yourself as the number, the judge. You yourself are now being numbered and judged because you don't have righteousness. You departed. Well, actually, you never came to me in the first place. And so I'm giving your kingdom over to the Medes and Persians. Does that make sense? You can actually read the rest of what I gave to you from the two Babylons. There's some very interesting things in there that may kind of... Did everyone get the handout? Okay. Let me know if I can turn this.
Offering unto me.
Can I turn this?
Now, Gad is the sun god?
Gad was the
Gad's
sun god.
referred to a lot in the Bible, right?
Mm-hmm. Right, Gad is in the Hebrew. Gad actually, let me look this up. You know, in the Old Testament, names always meant something. Exactly.
Many meanings. Try to memorize all those meanings, never have them in.
Mm-hmm. Right, Gad literally means truth, or an arch. Mm-hmm.
And Gad's also a place, too, isn't it?
Yeah.
There's a place called Gad.
Sometimes maybe some of them had a hard time keeping up with all of this. Okay, so as soon as the handwriting appears, judgment has been pronounced, and that same night, what happens?
He's slain.
To war god.
Right. There is the fall of Babel. And we mentioned Nabonidus. In fact, it was about 1 year prior to the events of this night that Nabonidus, who was in Tema for about 10 or so years, perhaps a little bit more, he got word of a great king and general by the name of... I knew that the way I worded that was going to make you think of Alexander. No, Cyrus the Persian. He got wind that Cyrus the Persian was now unified the Medes and the Persians and was conquering into Babylon. So in 540 BC, Nabonidus gathered his army, returned from Tema, and marched on Cyrus the Persian.
Oh, okay. That was where big mistake.
Yeah, very big mistake. It was actually October 10th, 1539 is when they met. And again, the place was about, I think, 20 or 25 miles north of Babylon. So the king of the Medes and the Persians, he's coming from which direction? He's coming from the north, but also the kingdom of the Medes and Persians were to the east of the Babylonian Empire. This was known as the Battle of Opus, where the Babylonian armies got decimated. And there are different accounts actually as to what happened to Nabonidus. We're not sure. Nobody really knows which one is true. Some tell us that he died at the Battle of Opus. Some tell us that he actually fled to a nearby town and later surrendered to Cyrus when he conquered Babylon. We're not entirely sure. But either way, he lost this battle, and within 3 days, Babylon was conquered.
Yes.
Now, who was Cyrus?
The Mede.
Cyrus the Mede or Cyrus the Persian?
Same thing. Mede, Persian.
Do we know anything about Cyrus? There's a title for him, right? In the Bible?
Cyrus the Great.
Does anyone remember this from Isaiah? He is called the Lord's anointed. Now wait a second.
No.
I thought that was a title for Jesus Christ.
Right.
Okay, let's go to Isaiah. Let me write this down. Isaiah 44.
I always thought Isaiah was many years before, like Jeremiah. And Daniel.
Yeah, you're talking about a couple hundred years before, actually.
How can that be?
Who knows the future and God knows the future.
Isaiah 44.
Isaiah 44
That's
and all the
right,
way
he is in there.
through
That's right.
chapter 45 and verse 3.
Isaiah 44.
It's speaking about Cyrus, but if you're reading the words there, if you were to take Cyrus's name out, you would think that these verses are actually speaking of none other than Christ himself. So let's read Isaiah 44 from verses, first let's do verses 24 through 28. Someone could read for us, please.
24 to 28.
Mm-hmm.
Thus saith the Lord thy Redeemer, and he will form thee from the womb. I am the Lord that maketh all things, that stretcheth forth the heavens alone, that spreadeth abroad the earth by itself, that frustrateth the tokens of the liars, and maketh diviners mad, that turneth wise men backward, and maketh their knowledge foolish, that confirmeth the word of his servant, and performeth the counsel of his messengers, that saith to Jerusalem, shall be inhabited, and to the cities of Judah, you shall be built, and I will raise up the decayed places thereof. That said to the deep, be dry, and I will dry up thy rivers. That saith of Cyrus, he is my shepherd, and shall perform all my pleasure. Even saying to Jerusalem, thou shalt be built, and to the temple thy foundation shall be laid.
Okay. Now we know that Jesus is also called the shepherd, right?
Mm-hmm.
But here we have an account, and notice verse 27 that says to the deep, be dry, and I will dry up the rivers. What did Cyrus do after the Battle of Opis? Because they marched onto Babylon, they saw the massive walls, and they realized...
They diverted the river.
Yeah, they realized that, look, we can't... There's nothing we can do. Nothing can break down this wall at this moment. These guys are safe within it. They have enough room, and they have water. They can survive for years. So
They had water.
So Rich, what did he do?
Diverted the Euphrates.
Right, he ordered his lieutenants to divert the Euphrates into another direction to the point where the water level in the Euphrates in Babylon dropped down to about, I think it was knee level.
Yeah, they could walk in.
And they walked right under through the riverbed.
Under
And
the
so,
brass gates.
Just mentioned that he diverts.
Cyrus is a star too, right?
I think,
A star?
Yeah, it's one of the constellation stars, isn't it?
I'm not sure.
I didn't see that text before.
You're thinking of Cyrus, but it's a different Cyrus. It's the Cyrus.
Oh, it's an S. Yeah. This is a C. Okay.
Yeah, because I'm picturing in my mind
You're right.
CYR, and I'm like
Cyrus is a different spell. I'm not gonna
Cyrus,
start.
or whatever you want to call it. So he diverts the Euphrates, marches under the walls, and Babylon is conquered. In what manner?
Rapidly,
that's,
Without
Without a fight.
without a fight.
they were all drunk.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, a lot of them probably couldn't even hold a sword at that point, let alone fight. So Babylon is conquered without a fight. Now, there's something else that the Bible mentions here in Isaiah 44 that Cyrus would do. And the last verse.
Yeah. Well, he gives the order to have Jerusalem and the temple rebuilt.
Right. So we know very shortly thereafter what was the decree that Cyrus gave. What did it do? Concerning Israel.
To rebuild the walls, right?
Right. He released the captives. made a proclamation, look, you're free. If you want to go back to Jerusalem, go build your temple, worship your true God. He releases the captives.
Where did they show them this in their writings?
Well, see, this is what's actually interesting because according to Jewish tradition, not biblical accounts, but to their, I guess, the Talmudic writings, the Jews actually claim that while this feast was going on and the river Euphrates was diverted, when Cyrus was marching upon the city, they actually claim that the true followers of the God of heaven, the true Jews at that time who were in Babylon, understanding that, look, this guy has been prophesied of in the book of Isaiah, that they actually dressed up in their rabbinical robes and that they created this kind of procession. They actually met Cyrus at the gate, holding in their hands the open scroll of the book of Isaiah, basically coming up to him and saying, look, you are the one whom God has appointed. That's what the Jews say. I'm not sure, whether that's true or not, but it is actually kind of interesting, them coming out. Look, we knew you were coming. God has given you over this kingdom.
What was his response?
I don't know. Rachel?
We learned about Cyrus. Wasn't he known as the Cyrus the Great? Because that's what's in our social studies book, and it says that at night he had his people dig out around it so that it would empty out so that they could get in.
Right. Yeah, that's one of his titles, Cyrus the Great. I just didn't want to use that because when we think someone the Great, automatically the first thing you think about is Alexander the Great. And I figure we get confused enough. No need for. But yeah, I found that interesting. That's what the Jews claim, that they actually marched and met him at the gate with the open scroll of the book of Isaiah right down to this point.
Well, they also did the same with Alexander, too, right?
Yeah.
Showed in Daniel or something. That's true. I don't know.
Yeah. So, can someone read 45 and verses 1, 2, and 3, please, of Isaiah 45?
Thus saith the Lord to his anointed, to Cyrus, whose right hand I have holden, to subdue nations before him. And I will loose the loins of kings, to open before him the two-leaved gates, and the gates shall not be shut. I will go before thee, and make the crooked places straight. I will break in pieces the gates of brass, and cut in asunder the bars of iron. And I will give thee the treasures of darkness, and hidden riches of secret places, that thou mayest know that I, the Lord, which call thee by thy name, am the God of Israel.
So again, why is it called Cyrus the Anointed One? Since all these titles, the shepherd and all of that, are actually titles for Jesus, so why is this attributed to Cyrus?
The Lord had a lot of anointed people.
But there's only one person other than Cyrus in the Bible that is called the Anointed, and that's Jesus.
But wasn't David anointed and Saul?
They were, but that wasn't their official title. I'm sorry?
He kind of delivers God's people from captivity.
Right, Cyrus is clearly a type of
Jesus, that's
type of Jesus Christ.
That's going back to verse 28 of 44.
Right, absolutely. Yeah, he's the shepherd. He will perform all the pleasure of the Father. Rachel?
Will we see him because of what he did or no?
You mean Cyrus in heaven?
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't have any indication in the Bible, unless somebody has one. I don't see an indication that whether we will or whether we won't. We just don't know. Not enough is said about the later end of his life. But yeah, Cyrus is simply the reason why this is attributed to Cyrus is because he's a type of Christ. He is a direct parallel, and we're going to mention that in a little bit. Are you good so far?
Yes.
Okay. The time that we have remaining, let's do what we always do with the first 6 chapters. We need to look at the type and the anti-type. This story is a parallel of which point in time? The very end. Okay, in the type, how does the story start in the historical account?
king has a feast.
Right, the king, he has a feast, and what does he do?
Oh, yeah.
What is he called to that feast? Can someone actually read that? I think it's, what is it, verse 2?
It's called concubines, wives, and all that.
Right, can we actually read that? Daniel 5 and to verse 1.
Belshazzar the king made a great feast to 1,000 of his lords and drank wine before the 1,000.
Now, who would be among this group?
Artists,
Yeah,
soothsayers,
Rulers.
Right, the nobles, the princes, the highest officers,
150.
all the movers and shakers within Babylon, within the kingdom of Babylon itself, not the city, but the entire kingdom. He gathered them for a special party.
Yes.
Where is Babylon located?
It's basically where
Is it
Iran
close
and
to-
Iraq is right now.
Oh,
Yeah,
further away from Egypt?
it's pretty far. Yeah. So the king, in the type, the king gathers the world together. In the antitype, is there a similar thing that will take place?
Yeah.
Right, the world, you know that spiritual Babylon with the ruler at the top gathers the world under its wing. It wants to have one massive party. When the king gathers the world together, what does he do? What do they do in that party? Mm-hmm. Okay.
Or the king.
Right, he leads them into fornication, drunkenness, and idolatry.
He did a lot of bad things there.
Yeah, this was the pinnacle of apostasy, of iniquity at that time. At the end of time, what does spiritual Babylon do? Can we actually go there? Let's go to Revelation 17, please.
I'm there.
Revelation 17, and let's do verses 1 through 5.
Can I do it?
Sure. Thank you.
And there came one of the 7 angels which had the 7 vessels, and talked with me, saying unto me, Come hither, I will show unto thee the judgment of the great Lord that sitteth upon many waters, which whom the king of the earth have committed fornication, and inhabitants of the earth have been made drunk with the wine of her fornication. What?
To verse 5.
Alright. So he carried me away in the spirit into the wilderness, and I saw a woman sit upon a scarlet-colored beast, full of names of blasphemy, having 7 heads and 10 horns. And the woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet color, and decked with gold and precious stones and pearls, having a golden cup in her hand, full of
Abominations.
and filthiness of her fornication. And upon her forehead was a name written, Mystery Babylon, the Great, the mother of harlots and abominations of the earth.
Okay, and then when we jump to Revelation 18, this idea of the wine, we read that how much of the world did spiritual Babylon have
All.
all of it.
All nations.
It calls the entire world, all nations, to drink the wine. So just like in the type, we have the king of Babylon who gathers the world together for this great massive party of idolatry, of fornication and drunkenness. The people are drunken with the wine of Babylon. So in the antitype in Revelation, we read about the system that causes all nations and all peoples to be drunk with the wine. What the wine actually represents in the antitype, because in prophecy it is a symbol we'll cover when we actually get to it in the book of Revelation. But all nations are drunk with the wine. In principle, what did Belshazzar do again?
Makes the common
Right.
holy.
He uses the holy.
He makes his churches.
Mm-hmm. He uses the holy for a common purpose. And you could say that, yes, at the same time that the church and state was mixed, because this was all the rulers, all the civil power in Babylon that was gathered together, but they gathered together to do what? What did verse 4 say? To glorify the false gods and give them worship. So they uses the holy for a common purpose. And the antitype at the end of time, again, do we see the same principle broken?
Yeah.
Yes.
How so?
Sunday for Sabbath.
I was saying that spiritual Babylon it brings the holy day of the Lord to a common level, and at the same time it does the opposite also, right? It takes a common day and lifts it up as holy. The same principle is broken. It takes the common commands of men, treats it as the word of God, as holy, and it takes a thus saith the Lord, remember, as something, don't worry about that. Completely does away with it. It uses the holy for a common purpose. Rachel?
Like, for example, some of my things that my school does is mostly on Sabbath, so I can't really help out. So, because yesterday, they had a car wash, and then a couple months ago they had a car wash on Saturday.
So what can you do with that situation?
I don't know.
Can you use it for something? Because you can't, of course, you can't partake of it, right?
Yeah.
Because it's on God's day. But is there also an opportunity for something there, maybe?
Kind of.
Yeah, there's a chance to witness there. Think about it. Because they may ask you, well, why can't you come? Oh, well, it's because this is what I believe. And it's a beautiful chance to witness if it comes up.
And they asked me, why can't you buy something on Friday nights? And I say why, and then they kind of keep asking, but then I kind of get a little carried away, and then they kind of walk away. So
But still, you planted that seed, and who knows, maybe in time it will spring up. Just keep praying about it.
okay.
That's good. That's very good. Okay. As soon as it uses, in ancient Babylon, as soon as that which was holy was used for a common purpose, and that which was common was glorified as holy, for example, the king himself, what took place? At that very moment? Right. Judgment and the verdict was pronounced. That very moment, the cup of iniquity reached its maximum. And so when we fast forward to the antitype, what does this point us to? That once this takes place, where a common day is exalted as holy and a holy day is brought down to a common level, when the whole world unites in this, and the being who is promoting this, namely Satan who is personating Christ, what takes place?
Is that when the
Sunday.
Holy Spirit is withdrawn?
Sunday
That's if you remember Daniel 12:1. At that time, right, shall Michael stand up, and there shall be a time of trouble such as the world has never seen. So when the world unites on this spiritual Babylon, probation, the door of mercy closes for the system. And you're right, Michelle, the Holy Spirit at that point is withdrawn. So the door of mercy closes for spiritual Babylon. Now there was a short pause between the judgment being pronounced. Look, time's up for you. That's it. You've made your decision and now it's time to live with it. There was a short pause between that and which event? In the historical account. There was a pause between the writing actually showing up. There was a small period of time between the writing showing up on the wall.
Within an hour. Within the hour.
That's within the hour of them committing the sin.
No, well, we know it happened exactly at that same time. When it says in the King James at that same hour, it literally means at that same moment. At that same exact moment. And that's what I had Dave read the other version. It actually says suddenly. That as soon as they did this, as soon as they united, suddenly, bam, that's it. The door of mercy is closed. Judgment has been pronounced. But there is a pause, or not a pause, but rather a short period of time between the judgment being shown and pronounced and someone doing what? And Cyrus doing what? Yeah, and Cyrus entering the city. There's a short period of time. So we're going to study the same thing in the book of Revelation, that between the time when probation closes and the arrival of the anointed one is a short period of time. You follow me?
Silence of heaven?
No, not quite.
Okay.
Good try though. Good try though. But it's connected to it. The door of mercy closes. And again, what did Cyrus do? How did he accomplish this? Doing what to the river? Euphrates is diverted and dried up. Is there a parallel to this at the end of time?
Well, if the Euphrates is actually water and it's diverted, you could say many people are diverted from the truth.
But remember, the door of mercy has already closed.
That's true.
They have already been deceived at this point.
Holy Spirit.
Well, in the antitype, what does water represent? People, right. Multitudes, tongues, and nations. It represents the people. And in fact, the very mention of Euphrates should take you somewhere in the book of Revelation that talks about a period of time after the door of mercy has closed, after Jesus has finished his work in the heavenly sanctuary. The plagues are now being poured out. And in one of those plagues, do you remember? In Revelation 16, let's go there really quick.
Isn't the river Euphrates is dried up?
The sixth plague. It's the time for the battle of Armageddon.
It's been dry in river, hasn't it? In reality, there have been word shortages there.
Oh, over there, yeah. The literal river, absolutely.
Yeah.
But the spiritual river and the antitype and the parallel to the end of time, it's still running strong. In fact, the current is becoming stronger and stronger. Revelation 16 and verses 12 through 16. Can someone read for us, please? Revelation
The
6.
sixth angel poured out his vial upon the great river Euphrates, and the water thereof was dried up, that the way of the kings of the east might be prepared. And I saw 3 unclean spirits like frogs come out of the mouth of the dragon, and out of the mouth of the beast, and out of the mouth of the false prophet. For they are the spirits of devils, working miracles, which go forth unto the kings of the earth and of the whole world, to gather them to the battle of that great day of God Almighty. Behold, I come as a thief. Blessed is he that watcheth and keepeth his garments, lest he walk naked, and they see his shame. And he gathered them together into a place called in the Hebrew tongue Armageddon.
Okay, so the Euphrates represents people, multitudes, tongues, and nations. So far, before this event, this spiritual river has been running in one direction, one current. And if you think about what was Euphrates to Babylon?
Lifeline.
Yeah, it was the lifeline. It was its main source of support. We know that spiritually speaking, Satan wouldn't have a false system of worship on this earth if he didn't have any support in the form of
Followers.
in the form of followers or people who would adhere to that system of belief. So the support, the life source of spiritual Babylon is the same thing as it was in ancient Babylon. It is the Euphrates. But here it represents the people. The great majority, virtually the entire world, which is now in support of Babylon and gives it its power. Look, we need to go ahead with this plan because look at the plagues, look at the pestilence. We need to return to the Lord, which means one of the things that they will do, of course, is take that which is holy and make it common and vice versa. But spiritual Euphrates, it changes what?
Direction.
Changes course. And when we dig into the 7 last plagues, we'll talk about that at this point in time. What is the significance of the Euphrates changing course and drying up?
God's Holy Spirit's withdrawn.
It has been withdrawn, yes. But we'll study how at this point in time, at the 6th plague, the people have realized, look, we have been duped. We have been deceived. And God will then snap it in their minds. Look, we have been deceived by this system. We have been supporting it. We have been promoting all of this and giving it its power and authority. They realize what these leaders have done. And so now this spiritual Euphrates does what? It changes course. We're no longer going to support it. We're actually going to cause
trial.
Babylon.
And that's right. We're actually going to go after the very ones that caused us to be deceived in the first place. So spiritual Euphrates changes course and dries up, which is the people. So we're almost done. Now once that river dries up, the very next event in Revelation 16 is what? Under the 7th plague. 7th last plague.
War.
Sorry?
7th angel.
War, but a war without
Greater.
a fight. There will be bloodshed, but without a fight.
Babylon splits.
What is described in Revelation 16 in that 7th plague?
Babylon splitting apart.
And the great voice of the temple of heaven from the throne saying, "It is done."
Hailstorm.
Keep reading.
And there were voices and thunders and lightnings, and there was a great earthquake, such as was not since men were upon the earth, so mighty an earthquake and so great. And the great city was divided into 3 parts, and the cities of the nations fell. And great Babylon came in remembrance before God, to give unto her the cup of the wine of the fierceness of his wrath. And every island fled away, and the mountains were not found. And there fell upon men a great hail out of heaven, every stone about the weight of a talent. And men blasphemed God because of the plague of the hail, for the plague thereof was exceeding great.
Okay, so what event is that describing?
The last, the end.
Which is? What are we waiting for?
Coming of Jesus Christ.
That's right, it's the second coming. It's the second coming. When the islands are no more, the biggest earthquake this world has ever seen, and fire comes down because now the Lord is revealing himself.
Can't go to the mountains. All come down on you.
Well, that's the paradox of them, running for the mountains and and hiding under the rocks, because very soon after these mountains they go under.
What about says you can't run to the mountain, but weren't God's people supposed to go to the mountain?
Oh, there will be. But at that same, when Jesus returns and the islands and mountains, they dissolve, what happens to God's people? That's right. They're taken up onto the cloud to be with the Lord in the air. Right? Just like we read in Thessalonians. In the historical account, the Lord's what? The Lord's anointed comes from where? comes from, remember, the Battle of Opis was just to the north, and at the same time, the Medo-Persian Empire was to the east of ancient Babylon. So he comes from the north and the east. And remember how we studied at the end of Daniel 11 how the king of the north controls the world economically, politically, and religiously? And then tidings out of the east and out of the north shall trouble him, and he shall go out with great fury and wrath to utterly destroy many. And how we mentioned that represents Jerusalem, because again, the north represents heaven itself. And so we know that this is speaking of Jesus himself. Jesus returns to the earth. And what does he do? What did Cyrus do shortly thereafter, after his return after his arrival in Babylon? Right, he released the captives and he allowed them to go where? Back to the land of Canaan. So Jesus returns to earth and releases the captives. So in a matter of speaking, we're stuck to this earth at the present time. But when Jesus returns, just like Cyrus makes a decree, okay, go to Canaan. So when Jesus returns, Jesus is going to say, let's go to the heavenly Canaan. Does that make sense? And there's one more thing that we can mention. There's probably some more things, but one main thing that we can mention, what happens to Daniel in the historical story?
Daniel
is in a new system.
Rewarded.
Daniel jumps up and says, I told you so.
He is rewarded, although I don't think that really has a bearing on the antitype. But through these events of what Cyrus did, through the events of this night, what happens to Daniel?
He's preserved.
He's preserved, right? Because we see him where? In the very next chapter. Okay, so we know that Daniel, the man of God, is preserved. Does that have a bearing on the antitype? Is there a parallel?
People are protected through it all.
Exactly. We mentioned that Daniel is a type of the 144,000. The ones who are blameless, who are transformed in character, and we know that it is the 144,000 who survive through it all. We could go deeper, but we don't have time, and we've got to close. Beautiful type and antitype. Following all the end time events. And that's what we've been seeing, chapter by chapter. These aren't just historical accounts. They're giving us a piece-by-piece prophetic look at the end of time, painting a beautiful story for us in order that we may be prepared for what's coming. So what are we to do, saints? That's right. Even though these things are going to happen, is there good news in that?
Yes.
You're going to be saved and go to heaven.
That's right. Because when these things take place, we're going to the heavenly Canaan. We're going to be with the Lord. We're going to see him face to face. We're going to worship him in his literal temple in heaven itself. So let's get serious and let's get moving because time is short.
Holy. Let's get holy.
Yeah. Let's remember, let's not use the common as holy and the holy as common. So let's ponder that, where we could improve in our lives, myself included, in those areas. Because I think all of us can improve, whether it's at home, whether it's at church, whether it's at work, whatever it may be. Amen?
This is not our home.
Yeah. Yeah, we got to get homesick. Seriously. This isn't our home. I can't wait to get off this planet. I mean, I haven't been that many years because I'm still young, you know, but still, it's like you look around and you just like, get off this rock.
You see
You don't hear that often enough.
dead in the road. I'm sick of seeing it.
You don't hear that. People are content and satisfied being here.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
They want to do all they can while they can.
Good, I'd like to make an announcement.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Anyone that's planning on going to the Doug Bashko lecture series next month, you'll have to have your money in tomorrow because it's going to be